Welcome back. In this video, we are going to take care of updating this screen or refreshing this screen once we come back from the members activity. So we start the activity to go to the members activity with a result this time. And if we do that, we usually need to have a code, so a unique code, and that's what we are going to use here. So first of all, in the task list activity, let's go ahead and create the companion object, which will contain a constant value, which will be our members request code. And it's going to be an integer, which I'm going to assign 13 to. All right, so this is the member request, and the request code will be used. And by the way, it's members request, let's call it like that. And this one will be used once we get the activity for result and once we start the activity. So now let's go ahead and start this activity for result. And that is the activity once we press this button here. So once we go and click on members, that's when we want to start the activity for result, because we want the user to go back and then come back to the screen. All right, so let's search for our starting the activity, and that is done once we click on this icon, which is in our on options item selected. So once we click on r.id action members, currently we start the activity, but without requesting a result or without waiting for a result. So let's change that. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say start activity for result. And that one will be our members request code that we also pass here. And then let's return true here, by the way, because it requires a boolean to be returned, and we want to make sure that this happens. Okay, now in our members activity, I will create a new variable, a flag, so to speak, which will allow me to know if there were made any changes or not, because I don't want to reload the activity, so the task list activity, if there are no changes made in the members activity. So I'm going to create a variable here, private var, which will be any changes made, or any changes made will be a boolean, which will be set to false. All right, so if there were no changes made, then of course it will stay false, but if there were changes made, we want to set that boolean to be true. Now, when do we know in this class that there were changes made? Well, we have this extra function here called member assigned success. So we know when we add a new user, that is when there were changes made. So we can basically just add a new variable here, which will, or we can assign our new variable any changes made to true. All right, so now we will know, okay, if members assigned success was called, changes were made, and if that's the case, then we can reload the whole activity. All right, I mean the task list activity, meaning this screen here can be reloaded then. And how can we now specifically take care of that? Well, we can just do it with this on back pressed functionality. So once we click back, what we want to happen is we want this to reload. All right, if there were any changes made. So we can just override the on back pressed functionality. So override on back pressed. And we can just say, okay, call this super call, but also check if there were any changes made. So if changes made, any changes, then set result to activity dot result okay. So now we just add this flag, which will be set result to result okay if there were any changes made. Now we can take that, of course, in our task list activity to then understand if there were any changes made or not. All right, now in our onCreate, we have this board document ID, which we made a local variable, so it's only visible inside of the onCreate function. But I want to change that. I want to make this a global variable so that we can use it outside of it as well. So I'm going to create a private late init var, which will be my mboard document ID, which will just be a string. And we can now set mboard document ID in here instead of this local variable that we had before. So we can get rid of that local variable. Of course, we need to replace it here in Firestore class getBoard details. Now, why would I do that? Well, because I also want to know the board document ID when I call the onActivity result function. So onActivity result, what I want to do is I want to check if the result code is success. So result code is activity dot result OK, and the request code was our members request code. If that's the case, then please go ahead and reload the whole details, which means do the same thing here, show progress dialog, and then call this Firestore class getBoard details. All right, so here we need to import activity for this to work, of course, and then else we're just gonna create a little logcat log.e cancelled. Nothing too fancy. All right, so let's import log as well. And now at that point, let's test this. All right, so there we are, Projet Manage. It needs to load the boards, so let's wait for that to happen. There we are. So Daddy's tasks is that's the one where we saw that it was created by Bart, right? And we see it in Homer's screen. That is great. But now let's go ahead and go to any other board. So board with image, and let's add a new member here. And currently we only have one potential member, right? We only have our Bart at gmail.com. Let's add him. You can see now he's there. Let's go and press the back button. And we can see the activity was reloaded. So the screen was reloaded, the data was reloaded. Of course, there were no changes made, but this is really just for the case that you add a member and then you don't open this activity for a while, and the member could have changed the whole screen, right? So he could have added a lot of new cards and everything. So he was just waiting for the invite and waiting for you to add him. And he already started doing stuff, and you just stood idle in this members activity and you didn't do anything else. And when you come back, you also want, of course, to have the updated version of what has been done on this activity. Okay. Now you could, of course, say, okay, I want to reload everything each time. But in this case, I'm doing it this way so that we don't load this activity every single time, even though it might not be necessary. Although you have to consider, of course, that this is a functionality that I have implemented because we are just using a very basic version of this application. If you want to always have the updated data, so let's say you have added 5 members and you always want to see the latest data when you come back to the screen, you of course want to load that getBoard details every single time that you get back to this activity. So not only on create, but also, for example, on resume. Okay, so you could just override on resume. Here you could just say, okay, each time you resume this activity, then I want to reload everything. Okay, but this will of course create a lot more requests, or many more requests on the database. And if you want to optimize for requests, then the approach that I've shown you is the better one. If you want to optimize for user experience, then you would use this on resume approach, where you constantly update it if you get back to this activity. You could even say, okay, it should be constantly updated or checked with the database if there were any changes made, and if there were any changes made, reload the page or reload this whole activity. Okay, so that if somebody makes changes here, that we see the changes real time. But for now, you know why the decisions were made this way. It's for optimization or for cost reduction, so to speak. All right. So let's open up another board, or actually we can even open up the same board. So you could see it was reloaded. Now if I go to members and then I just go back, you can see the page will not be reloaded. So there was no reload here because, well, our variable here, any changes made, was false. That's why the result wasn't set to OK. That's why the onActivity result code, this one here, was not triggered, and our lock cancelled was triggered. So you can even check the logcat out. Here you can see lock cancelled, or warning cancelled, or error cancelled was triggered. All right, so that's it for this video. And as I said, just select the version that you want to run, right? The way you want to optimize this application. All right, so see you in the next video.